Good evening.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm thinking that folks might come in after we start off, which is totally fine. But just in the interest of time and for our viewers at home, we did want to get started. So thank you for being with us. And I think I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Provenzano.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. My name is Brett Provenzano. I am the superintendent of the Fairport Central School District. This is our 8th year at this, and I'm really proud of the fact that our Board of Education continually engages in the budget process. And you'll see in a little bit, it's just not an event. It's a multiple-step process, and this is the most important part. Each year, probably around October and November, the board establishes budget goals, and those budget goals guide us through the budget process. It keeps us grounded to a set of principles around our expectations. Thank you very much, Ms. Reddick. There is a presentation that is linked to the YouTube video. Thank you for everyone's patience. As we prepare room 512, there's some upgrades going on with the infrastructure in that room, so we've had to adapt our broadcasting process. So as I was saying, the Board of Education has goals that guide our budget process. They help us tell our story. It helps us prioritize the dollars because the dollars require us to be thoughtful, to listen, to make sure that we're building a budget that meets the community's needs, that meets our students' needs, and does all we can do to be the very best for our students and our community. As you can see, this is a process. February is about the non-instructional budget. The non-instructional budget is pretty much the cost of doing business. It's all the stuff behind the scenes that require us to operationalize our programming for our students, for the benefit of our students. The non-instructional budget will be presented on February 6th at a workshop, and then February 14th at a formal business meeting. Tonight, as you see going backwards, I'm sorry, very timely, the governor did share her executive budget. Mr. Stevens will be talking about that in a second. Then you'll see between February 14th and March 6th, again, we're building the budget. We're prioritizing the needs of our school community, what our students are signing up for, what classes they're signing up for. We're looking at enrollments. Are there any additions that we need to make? Are there positions that need to be shifted or changed? Retirements are coming in. In March, you will see us talking about the meat and potatoes of our budget, where our story is told every single day with our kids. That's our instructional budget. You'll see it at the workshop and then at the board meeting on March 21st. Again, refining, making sure that we're balancing our budget, making sure that we're being responsible and responsive to the needs of our students and to our community. That's, again, always Mr. Stevens and team, the administrative team, gets out our pencils, sharpens it, and making sure that we're, again, putting forth the program that our community expects and our students deserve. On April 18th, the budget is adopted. And that's pretty impressive. If you take a look, February 1st, which is today, all the way to April 18th, we're talking budget. And it's such an important part of the school year because it is a time for us to reflect upon the students' needs, our community's interests, and making sure that we're meeting the needs and the growing needs of our students and school community. And then on May 2nd, there'll be a public hearing. And then on May 16th, the budget vote and board election. So we have a process for those who have signed on today via social media and those who have come here. We appreciate your time and interest in learning about the budget and budget process and perhaps even having a voice in it tonight. Mr. Stevens is going to talk a little bit about the executive budget that was shared this afternoon.
Okay, thank you and good evening. So just up on the screen, you'll see a little bit of a summary for the governor's proposal as it relates to school aid. Overall, it calls for a $3.1 billion increase in 23-24 over the 22-23 school aid. About $2.7 billion of that is related to foundation aid, and foundation aid is essentially the largest piece of aid for operating aid in school districts. So it makes up for Fairport about 60% of the overall state aid we receive. And of that $2.7 billion increase, $250 million is dedicated to support high-impact tutoring for students struggling to recover from pandemic-related learning loss. Schools are still waiting to see how that gets allocated and determined overall within the foundation aid formula, but that is a piece of the foundation aid itself. Key to note that this is the largest increase schools have seen since the foundation aid formula has been in place. It's been about 17 years. And now this is scheduled to be fully phased in and fully funded according to the formula for school districts in 2023-24. So it's been a big piece of advocacy over the years across all associations within the school community. What that means for Fairport in terms of foundation aid is about $4.6 million increase, or 16.8% overall. Again, we're still waiting to see what portion of that increase is linked to the high-impact tutoring piece. Overall, $125 million is slated to expand the universal pre-K programs for schools. That is funded typically based on a per pupil allocation, so it all depends on how many pupils school districts are able to bring in. Historically, for us, it's been about $5,400 per pupil in terms of what the allocation has been. And expense-based aids, those are aids such as transportation aid, BOCES aid, building aid on capital projects, textbooks, software, hardware, et cetera. Those are aids that school districts receive based on expenses in the prior year, and that's aided at a formula base for the following year. And right now, that is proposed to fund those aids based on the current statutory formula. So that's a positive piece overall. There's no change in formulas for school districts, and will continue to be funded as has been historically for schools. So that's a brief overall summary for school aid and what the executive proposal means for Fairport as a whole.
So over the next several months, we'll be taking Fairport's allocation and plugging it into our process, right? And one of the most important part of this process is the advocacy component. Our Board of Education, fierce advocates, constantly, working with our local leaders and state leaders, advocating for mental health, universal pre-K, response to intervention and enrichment models to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students. It costs dollars to make that a reality, to make sure that we're enriching, that we're remediating and meeting the needs of our students in a multi-tiered systems of support, which that includes mental health and the academic components of our work here in Fairport. Addition, safety and security is on everyone's mind, as well as sustainability and our facilities and facilities planning, making sure we can upkeep our facilities so we have modern, safe, and engaging learning environments. There are also underfunded mandates, requirements that we have to abide by as part of a public school, and we call these underfunded mandates because dollars are given through foundation aid. However, the amount that it actually costs us to implement these mandates is not proportional to the amount of aid that we get. So these points of advocacy are continually going. In fact, this Saturday we'll be meeting with state representatives, local representatives to advocate on these very points. And as part of the board's work to make sure that we're recruiting as well. There's problems with teacher certifications and civil service exams that we're advocating with these governmental leaders as well, and the board is at the forefront of that. Fairport's board has always been strong advocates, and one of the other pieces that makes them unique is that they're always listening, and they always want to learn and create a budget. This is not a rubber-stamped process. There's lots of listening. There's a thought exchange out there. We're taking those comments in. We hope that those people who are viewing this have taken the thought exchange, or those members that are here, please, you could scan that QR code as well to continue to give your feedback. The board pays attention to the feedback, and that helps us inform our process, as tonight we'll do the same. The thought exchange results are starting to come in. These are the top themes: academics, code of conduct, communication, facilities, extracurricular activities, and cost and taxes. Now, I will share in a full report once the thought exchange closes. We'll share that in a greater report. But these are the emerging themes as we start our budget process. And with that, we're here to listen, take information in from our community members. So this is an opportunity for community members to come up and share their thoughts, their priorities, their expectations, but by all means, this is your time.
I know a few people asked if they had to sign up ahead of time. This is not that kind of situation. You are more than welcome to come up and talk to us and give us your feedback, suggestions, ideas. That's why we're here and set aside this time. I also wanted to mention that the information we shared from the state did just come out at what time today? Yeah, this afternoon. So I'm sure we'll have more details and more clarification in later days, but it did just arrive today.
Some awkward wait time. If there's any board members who have some thoughts, this would be a time to share some of your thoughts. And again, this is the beginning of the process, and the board continually listens and tries to interact with the community, and this is one way that they do that. If there's anything on the YouTube channel where people are asking questions, we'll be happy to take questions in that realm too.
Thoughts or questions?
So I could see if I could fill in some time here. These advocacy efforts, we're really proud of the fact that these are Fairport priorities, but they're also Monroe County priorities. And there's lots of time, and I think some board members who are on the legislative committee, we spend a lot of time working and collaborating with our counterparts. So when we go to our legislators or our lawmakers and leaders, that our message is succinct. And I don't think anybody could disagree with, the priorities that are up here. And I'm really hopeful that we'll continue to meet, get our needs met so we can provide all these points of advocacy. Dr. White?
I think one thing that always jumps out at me when we're talking about our advocacy points and when we're meeting with legislators, it's not all asking for money, and I think that's important to highlight. Things like the capital outlay project, increasing our threshold from 100 to 250,000, that's our budget. So we're currently capped that we can do and plan for 100,000 in our buildings. But we just need them to approve the legislation that says if we have the money, we could up that to 250. So if we wanted to do a little more work around our buildings each year and plan for it, we could do that. So that doesn't cost them anything. That's already in our budget. Things like changes to the civil service requirements or exams, or reciprocity when it comes to teacher certification, so that we can, have teachers from other states come to New York who are already prepared. So stuff that won't necessarily cost more for New York State, but that could help us a lot. So we're not just, we do ask for funding for a lot of different things, but it's not our only ask. The teacher shortage is huge, and being able to have that reciprocity, if somebody wants to come back home to New York or wants to move to New York, that would be amazing. But yeah, we have some tough teacher certification requirements in New York, but we can get some great people from out of state.
Do you want to, why don't you, is there a mic up here?
They just can't hear you online.
Is it on? As far as UPK, so I was looking into some of the details about the new UPK funding. It looks like requires a 5-hour day, 5 hours, 5 days a week, which is a lot for little guys, but also is prohibitive to community preschools who don't have daycare licenses, because once it's over a certain number of hours a day, they now have to be a licensed daycare to have the kids there, which makes it more difficult for us to partner with preschools. Is there any funding that we have in the district for UPK that is not tied to that 5-hour rule, like any older programs, or is it now bringing all the old money into the same requirements.
Yeah, the funding pieces we have, we've got one that was an award back in 2014-15 tied to full day 5-hour programs, and then the new funding that we've seen that's been allocated up to this point have the same restrictions at the state level for us as schools. 4-year-olds, 5 hours a day for the full day, 180 days for the full school year. And yeah, so right now the funds that have been allocated for Fairport up to this point through 22-23, we'll take a look to see what the 23-24 funding entails. It's a per pupil allocation of $5,400 per pupil. So anything, above that cost, as again Mr. Provenzano was alluding to, anything above that cost then gets absorbed into the general fund as a whole, to help fund those programs. So that's why you see in one of our advocacy points here for universal pre-K is to bump that per pupil allocation up, into $8,000 to $10,000 range, which will then help us, be able to have those fully funded by the state as a whole in the grants. But in terms of the rules restrictions, those have all been the requirements that we've had to follow.
Is that a request for advocacy, though, to say lower it below 5%?
I mean, it seems like probably a lost cause, honestly, but because it's hard to go back. But I think I work with preschoolers, and I know some of the families I talk to, they don't even want to do 5 days. They want to do 3 mornings a week because it's a lot for the little kids. Or then you're looking at nap time, and also you could get double the number of students in if you had a morning class and an afternoon class. Or I've talked to some of the program directors of preschools that I visit for work, and they said we would love to do it, but we don't have a daycare license, and the amount of bureaucracy that you are all familiar with to be able to get that in place makes it really difficult to be a community partner.
I think you just said it right there, and that's what the bureaucracy is. It's late. This issue is latent with it, and there's all sorts of reasons and different family needs, and that's why it's sort of hard it's challenging, to bring on a full pre-K program because of what you just shared about the difference of different family needs and differences with
I guess that speaks to Dr. White's point of advocacy beyond money. We want this money, we want the allocation and the state funding. But to your point, are there other parts of this very complicated, complex issue that we can advocate that's not just money, but telling legislatures look at limits, look at these other issues of ways that we can make UPK possible for families?
Yeah, what that barrier is. And one other thing, in Rush Henrietta, when we were there years ago, the UPK program, they contracted with different schools, and then if you got approved, they would basically pay your tuition to that school. I don't know if are we able to do that with child cares that provide preschool, where it could just be a few kids in the class and not the whole class?
Do you know? I don't know the answer to that. I do know that, again, if you look at a program, right, you'd want to have levels of consistency, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what becomes challenging when you're trying to cater to all the different needs out there.
That's why we just put that request for proposals out, so we would be able to. The RFP that went out would be at different child care facilities, and then we would, through the grant funding, pay them and for that time of the day. So say a family needs their kid there for 8 hours, 5 of the hours would be covered through the grant funding. So it is a financial relief for the families, and it gives them a more structured class
So the
setting.
request for proposals wasn't like they had to have a standalone classroom that was Fairport UPK. It could be a few students within a class.
Oh, no, it does. It does, yeah. That's
Well, I mean,
sorry.
does it have to be the entire class at this daycare is all Fairport UPK, or could it be Fairport UPK is paying for some of the students in that class, but not all of them?
No, I think it has to be the standalone.
It has to be a standalone. Because you were saying 5 hours out of the 8-hour day. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
But if you think about that, that's how I think you were just saying, Brian, that it's complicated, because when you're running a program and you have kids going 5 hours or 8 hours or 3 hours, that becomes a challenge, the continuity.
Okay. Have you guys gotten any responses on the request for? or whatever. the
Close
proposals?
today.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have
Okay.
interest, yes.
Cool.
And we'll be developing that, I'm sure, in a workshop near you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. UPK is definitely a community interest. I know the board is regularly getting, feedback on some community members' expectations on that.
Other questions? Hopes?
Yeah, hopes are good.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be sitting around here, I'm sure, for a few minutes. We don't want to, drag this out if there are no immediate questions, but I know the board is always accessible and we'll be around here for a few more minutes. But we'll be signing off on our social media platform, YouTube Live. Again, appreciate everybody's interest and participation. Please consider adding more thoughts to the thought exchange as we move through the budget process. Thank you and have a nice evening. Drive safely.